With love and kisses from 20th Century Fox, straight from the shoulder, right from the heart, comes the musical cavalcade and the personal story of the greatest business on earth. Good evening, everyone. This is Stone Gasman, live from New York City. And today we are going to be doing an audio commentary for the 1954 film There's No Business Like Show Business, directed by Walter Lang and starring Ethel Merman, Dan Dailey, Mitzi Gaynor, Donald O'Connor, and an actress by the name of Marilyn Monroe. Yes, this is one of the... this is a Marilyn movie, kind of, sort of, in a roundabout way. It is actually a Marilyn movie, although the reason why I'm doing this commentary is not because of the fact I'm a Marilyn fan or the fact that I'm doing all her films. No, actually, I'm doing audio commentaries on all of Mitzi Gaynor's movies. She just turned 92 yesterday. And this is my sixth commentary. This is commentary number 6, following We're Not Married, Bloodhounds and Broadway, Down Among the Sheltering Palms, South Pacific, and earlier today I did a commentary for 3 Young Texans, which was the other film that she did in 1954. But this was something different. This was a massive extravaganza. I mean, to be perfectly honest, of all of Mitzi's movies, comparably speaking, I mean, not counting South Pacific, of course, that's something else entirely. But There's No Business Like Show Business is probably the biggest production that Mitzi Gaynor was involved with when she was at Fox. Here again, not counting South Pacific, which is more of a Magnum movie as opposed to a Fox movie. The thing is that despite all the extravagance, despite all the hype of the CinemaScope and all this stuff, I do think that this movie is overblown a bit, and I'm going to be a bit critical at times of this particular movie. And I think, I think, look, I mean, I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm not going to be too harsh. And here again, it's not like I didn't enjoy it, but at the same time, there was some major issues that I had, and it prevented me from fully enjoying it. Numerous things, even being in a musical mood, something was tampering with my initial viewing of this several years ago, and upon a rewatch, my opinion hasn't really changed much. But I think in the end, I think that there's certain things that I should address in detail. And there's other things that I think that this movie deserves attention for, just to, I think that the movie is worth doing a commentary on, even if it's not among the best of 1950s musicals. And Fox put out a Blu-ray. It did not have a commentary. So let's make up for that with this audio commentary, okay? Now, I am paused on the 20th Century Fox logo, and let's go ahead and get started. Countdown on 3, 2, 1, and play. I've always loved how the Fox logo looked at that time. Very colorful, the dark sky and everything. And we are, of course, hit immediately with an Irving Berlin song. Yes. Every song in this movie is pretty much from Irving Berlin. And this is essentially a hodgepodge of Irving Berlin songs with this umbrella of a story, which doesn't have much complication or conflict at all. It's all we really do in this movie is we follow a vaudeville family. We start out in 1919. You know, the Ethel Merman and Dan Dailey, they meet, you know, when they're performing on Broadway. They fall in love. They have some children. We find out in 1923. And then we go even further. And eventually, half of the movie is Donald O'Connor and Marilyn Monroe trying to have a relationship, more or less. And the attention kind of shifts over to Marilyn Monroe pretty much in the second half. And we kind of get sidetracked as to, you know, we're supposed to be following the Donahues. Our story is about the Donahues. You know, it opens, and I was like, great, okay, you know, I'm down for this. I'm all down for this. But here again, I mean, it doesn't deliver on that promise of being about this family. Instead, it shifts focus to Marilyn Monroe, and that's when things just kind of, you know, go sideways. But at any rate, but one thing I cannot deny is this movie is gorgeous. Fox spent a pretty penny, and it shows. It shows that they've spent $5.3 million. And in 1954, that was buku money right there. Okay, this was one of the most expensive productions that Fox undertook in the 1950s. You know, musicals had done very well. And one particular example, which this movie kind of is related to in a roundabout way, is a 1947 film called Mother Wears Tights, where Dan Dailey right here did that movie with Betty Grable. And it was the 5th highest box office hit of 1947 of the entire year. And it was also the biggest hit for Fox at that time. So this was Fox's bread and butter, these song and dance musicals, these musical comedies, which featured, you know, supremely talented dancers and singers. And, you know, they would come out in these lavish costumes and have these lavish sets. But in 1954, 20th Century Fox decided to essentially go all in with this musical. And, you know, we'll talk a lot about Irving Berlin, and we'll talk about the history of all this. Now, this didn't originate on the stage, however. This was essentially thought up of There's No Business Like Show Business is a song from a musical that Irving Berlin did called Annie Get Your Gun. Okay. It's a 1946 musical by Irving Berlin, based on a book by Dorothy Fields and her brother Herbert. And the story is a fictionalized version of the life of Annie Oakley from 1860 to 1926, a sharpshooter who starred in Buffalo Bill's Wild West, and her romance with sharpshooter Frank E. Butler, who lived from 1847 to 1926. The 1946 Broadway production was a hit, and the musical had long runs in New York and London, spawning revivals, a 1950 film version, and television versions. Songs that became hits include There's No Business Like Show Business, Doing What Comes Naturally, You Can't Get a Man with a Gun, They Say It's Wonderful, and Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better. Okay? Now, so this was a musical about Annie Oakley and Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And Ethel Merman had originated the role of Annie Oakley on stage in 1946. And following her would be Dolores Gray and Mary Martin, who we talked a lot about yesterday in the South Pacific commentary, because she originated Nellie on Broadway in South Pacific. And later on, Bernadette Peters, Mary Lou Henner would play Annie Oakley. So there have been many, many revivals of that musical since then. So what Fox essentially wanted to do here was essentially do a hodgepodge of Irving Berlin songs. And yes, we need to talk about Irving Berlin a bit more because he was an American composer and a lyricist, and music forms a large part of the Great American Songbook. He was born in Imperial Russia and arrived in the United States at the age of 5. For much of his career, Berlin could not read sheet music and was such a limited piano player that he could only play in the key of F sharp. He used his custom piano equipped with a transposing lever when he needed to play in keys other than F sharp. He was known for writing music and lyrics in the American vernacular, uncomplicated, simple, and direct, with his stated aim being to reach the heart of the average American, whom he saw as the real soul of the country. In doing so, said Walter Cronkite at Berlin's 100th birthday tribute, he, quote, helped write the story of this country, capturing the best of who we are and the dreams that shape our lives, unquote. He wrote hundreds of songs, many becoming major hits. During his 60-year career, he wrote an estimated 1,500 songs, including scores for 20 original Broadway shows, 15 original Hollywood films, with his songs nominated for 8 times for Academy Awards. Many songs became popular themes and anthems, including Alexander's Ragtime Band, Blue Skies, Easter Parade, Putting on the Ritz, Cheek to Cheek, White Christmas, Happy Holiday, and, of course, There's No Business Like Show Business. His Broadway musical in 1943 film This Is the Army with Ronald Reagan had Kate Smith singing Berlin's God Bless America, first performed in 1938. Berlin's songs have reached the top of the charts 25 times and have extensively been recorded by many singers. Berlin died in 1989 at the age of 101. Composer Douglas Moore sets Berlin apart from all contemporary songwriters and includes him instead with Stephen Foster, Walt Whitman, and Carl Sandburg as a great American minstrel, someone who is, quote, caught and immortalized in the songs what we say, what we think about, and what we believe. Composer George Gershwin called him, quote, the greatest songwriter that has ever lived, and composer Jerome Kern concluded that Irving Berlin has no place in American music. He is American music. Well, in my personal opinion, I find him hot and cold. No, I mean, look, I like some of the songs, and some of the songs I don't really care for. I mean, as far as the music alone, as far as the soundtrack alone, I'm very mixed on it. I mean, it's somewhat balanced out by the stunning cinematography, as well as the amazing costumes. Okay, I mean, visually, there's so much more. There's so much here. I only liked about half of the songs. I only found half of the songs rather catchy or memorable. That's just me, though. I found here again, the soundtrack, this overall soundtrack in this movie is a hodgepodge of Irving Berlin music, and these characters none of them are really fleshed out. Like none of them are really given a chance to really build any kind of character or have any kind of arc. I mean, for a while it looks like Marilyn might have an arc, but she doesn't really. Fox shoehorned Marilyn Monroe in this movie, and I think it greatly affected the overall result. I don't think that was Marilyn's fault for the most part. That is really more Fox's fault. In a nutshell, what essentially happened is that Marilyn Monroe was more or less going on strike. She refused to appear in a movie with the title The Girl in Pink Tights. I don't blame her. So she decided to go off with Joe DiMaggio, the famous baseball player, and they would eventually get married. So when she came back to Fox, Fox insisted that she had to do There's No Business Like Show Business, even though she was never originally intended to be a part of this this movie. And what this movie, I think, was originally supposed to serve was, here again, showcasing these Irving Berlin musical numbers in CinemaScope. That was the overall original goal. And it was a perfect time for Ethel Merman, a longtime Broadway queen, to finally have a movie showcasing her talents. And the movie pushes her aside when Marilyn takes the stage. Essentially, my biggest gripe with There's No Business Like Show Business is that I'm frustrated that the movie wasn't more about Dan Dailey and Ethel Merman, who I thought we barely got a chance to meet, let alone get to know throughout the first act of this movie. And by the time the second act comes around, they're almost completely ignored as we focus on Donald O'Connor and Marilyn Monroe's growing relationship, which to be perfectly honest, personally, I didn't give a damn about. I just didn't give a damn about. It didn't create any kind of drama or or complications, or it didn't. To me, it didn't go anywhere. It just kind of dangled. It just kind of. There was no real satisfaction out of how that relationship was generated and where it eventually went in terms of the movie. And that to me is the biggest issue. And like I said, to give Marilyn a lot of credit, she never wanted to do this movie. She was flat out was like, no. I think for completely different reasons than for doing The Girl in the Pink Tights. But I think and I'm here again, this is just speculation on my part. I do think that, she felt like that this was a movie where she almost didn't belong in, but that's my own speculation, that one part. But she ultimately said yes due to one reason. Fox said, look, if you do There's No Business Like Show Business, you will have the 7-year itch, which at the time was a white-hot comedy on Broadway, written by George Axelrod. And that, of course, became one of Marilyn's most famous movies because of the subway grate blowing up her dress, which, in my personal opinion, big deal. But then again, I wasn't around in the 50s to soak up all this Marilyn madness. I mean, I know I sound like an alien a little bit, because it's like, well, it's like in I Love Lucy when they're going to go see the Marilyn movie together, and and Ricky says, yeah, they'll make me forget my troubles. I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, look, she was a gorgeous woman, which it almost felt she was manufactured for the screen in terms of, everything that went into that image. You know what I'm saying? It just, I do think that she gave genuinely good performances in a handful of films, namely Bus Stop, Some Like It Hot, which I own on Blu-ray. It's the only Marilyn movie I own. And The Misfits. Yeah, I know. I'm talking about Marilyn, and she isn't even on screen yet. Well, that's the thing. I mean, she doesn't come again. She doesn't come until the 29-minute mark. And I suppose, I suppose I could have just prattled on about Dan Dailey and Ethel Merman, who I'm going to talk about. But in a roundabout way, I'm going to do the opposite of what this movie does. Is that I want to talk about overall, because Marilyn is the big deal about this movie. This is the reason why people know this movie now is because of Marilyn's presence in it. It's certainly not Dan Dailey, who, to be fair to him, he was a huge Fox player. He was in Mother Wore Tights, and he made 3 other movies with Betty Grable, and including My Blue Heaven, which I have yet to get to and do a commentary for. But I mean, all the packaging and all the attention that this movie has done in terms of its promotion, in terms of physical media, in terms of whenever it's mentioned, it's merely because somebody's talking about Marilyn Monroe. I mean, but as I said, I mean, she never wanted to do this movie. And I think, and unfortunately, it does cause friction behind the scenes. We'll get to that. There's Mitzi. Yep. There's Mitzi Gaynor. Now, this is Johnny Ray. And Johnny Ray, this was his first film. He was an American singer and pianist. But this was his only film. Tony Bennett called Ray the father of rock and roll, and historians have noted him as a pioneering figure in the development of the genre. Although he kind of got a bad rap after this movie. I mean, he was kind of blamed for the movie's failure, which I think is very unfair. There he is all the way on the far right of the screen. Well, actually, from left to right, there's Donald O'Connor, Ethel Merman, Dan Dailey, Mitzi Gaynor, and Johnny Ray. And these are the 5 Donahues. Mm-hmm. And like I said, no complaints whatsoever with the sets, with the costumes, with the music, the singing. I mean, these are all well executed numbers. This movie, more than half of it is music. More than half of it is, everybody just putting on a show, mostly on stages. And a lot of it is fun. A lot of it is colorful. The problem is it's not much more than a string of musical numbers. There's not much to the story and the characters, and that's my biggest issue with this. And believe me, I like my fair share of musicals and grew up around musical theater. And, my favorite use of the song There's No Business Like Show Business is actually from a 1991 film called Noises Off, which in fact had Mary Lou Henner, who played Annie Oakley. But I mean, the truth is, I wanted more Ethel Merman. I wanted more of the family. I wanted the entire movie to focus on the family, because I mean, if you want us to care about Marilyn so much, then make her the protagonist. Maybe make her the outsider to the family, and then she has to be accepted when she falls in love with the son, or something to that effect. I mean, you got to pick one or the other. And it's just, this feels like, this feels two sides fighting for the nucleus, in that we have all these extravagant numbers. They are appealing to the eyes. The music is, for the most part, good. Here again, I personally don't like every single song, but I do think that they're all relatively well executed in terms of the numbers themselves and the choreography and costumes and all that stuff. All that stuff is fine. The money is there on the screen. What this film is lacking is a genuine narrative. genuine narrative, genuine conflict, genuine drama. There's not really any comedy in this movie. I mean, and especially with Donald O'Connor, I mean, you would think after the success of Singing in the Rain that he would, be used more for some comedy. But no, that's not really the case here. I mean, and by the way, Donald O'Connor and Mitzi Gaynor would reunite for a film at Paramount a couple years later called Anything Goes, which they made with Bing Crosby, which I actually prefer far more than this. Now, I'm just going to list the songs. I'm just going to list the songs here. But early on in the first act, we have like Ethel Merman and Dan Dailey singing When the Midnight Choo Choo Leaves for Alabama. Later on, Mitzi and Donald O'Connor are going to reprise that. Then we got Play a Simple Melody. A Pretty Girl is Like a Melody. Dan Dailey singing You'd Be Surprised. And Ethel Merman sings Let's Have Another Cup of Coffee. Then the whole cast sings the Alexander's Ragtime Band, sans Marilyn Monroe. And here we have Mitzi Gaynor making a fabulous entrance. I mean, here again, I wish most of the movie was more concerned about her and Donald O'Connor and Johnny Ray, because all of them kind of get here again pushed off to the side, which is just, it's kind of a shame. And wow, I mean, Mitzi is just dynamite in this movie. I mean, like I said, she had already made 8 films at Fox. Okay, she knew everything at this point. She was, there was nothing more for her to prove, really. Now, and funnily enough, I think this movie kind of proved overall that she was, by and large, a star. And it's a shame that Fox did not keep her, because who knows what she could have done. And well, we know what she did, but the whole point is that let's just say that the separation from her and Fox wasn't it wasn't the best it could be. Now, see, I really wish. Let me just pause here for a moment. Let me explain something here, because I really wish there was an autobiography out there so I can really check for sure, but because at IMDb, I mean, take everything with a grain of salt, I know. But in the trivia section for There's No Business Like Show Business, there is some juicy stuff, which I guess I should have kind of expected, but I didn't. But I mean, here's Johnny Ray singing. We'll get back to him in a minute. But Johnny Ray, who plays the older son Steve, was a popular singing star of the early 1950s and had recently had a chart-topping hit with his version of Cry. According to screenwriters Henry Ephron and Phoebe Ephron, 20th Century Fox hired Ray for this film, hoping that the singer could duplicate the success of Frank Sinatra, and became a major movie star. Then they discovered that, unlike Sinatra, Ray couldn't dance or act. The studio's solution was to have the Ephrons rewrite the film so that Steve Donahue leaves the family act early on to become a priest, as a way to, quote, get Ray off screen as quickly as possible. Moviegoers did not respond well to Ray's acting debut, and this remains the one and only major film in which he ever appeared. Now, and see, this is where, this is what I was talking about. I'm not sure I 100% buy this, and I would absolutely insist on a source. But in IMDb trivia, it actually says this. Mitzi Gaynor, who was 22 when this film was released. Actually, I think she was 23, but it doesn't matter. Has said that she hated Marilyn Monroe. The studio informed her that she was being terminated at such young age so as to bank on Monroe, and that Marilyn kept flirting with Mitzi's husband, Jack Bina, whom she was dating at the time. That latter portion, I believe, more than the first portion. Here again, I would absolutely demand for some kind of source and verification on that. Not to say I'm afraid of somebody coming up to me and say, oh no, wait. No, I mean, I do believe there is some truth there. I mean, because it does seem, it just does. I mean, Gaynor leaving Fox was just a bit odd. I mean, looking at everything, it was just a bit odd that she didn't, do more at the studio, even though she blossomed at the studio. It doesn't make any sense. In every movie, she gave 110%. Even in a Western like Three Young Texans, where she went to another studio to shoot. Yeah, it was distributed by Fox, but she still gave 110%. And There's No Business Like Show Business is a perfect example. Here again, I don't blame Marilyn. I blame Fox. I blame how they shoehorned her in this movie when she really didn't belong in this movie. And, I am not a Marilyn Monroe hater. Absolutely not. I mean, I think a lot of people would assume that. No, absolutely not. My whole thing is that she is just a massive distraction in this movie. The first time I watched it, as soon as she came on screen, I was like, okay, why are we following Marilyn now? I mean, I know she was part of the cast, but, I thought this movie was about this family. And when we started spending more and more time with Marilyn, I was like, well, wait a minute. Is the movie about this family, this vaudeville family, or is it about Marilyn Monroe? Make up your mind. You know what I'm saying? This is lavish stuff. Look at this. Look, I mean, this is $5.3 million in 1954. You can tell that Fox spent a shit ton of money on this movie. Was it worth it? I mean, I suppose if you're a Marilyn Monroe fan, sure. But here again, I approach this as a Mitzi Gaynor fan. And here she is back on screen here. And here again, all these movies I approached with the idea that if I was, in the 1950s and I was seeing all her movies from when she started in My Blue Heaven with Dan Dailey and coming all the way up to There's No Business Like Show Business, I probably would have walked out and been like, well, I wanted more Mitzi and less Marilyn. That's basically the whole thing in a nutshell. Or rather, more Mitzi and Merman than Marilyn. Basically, that's it in a nutshell. And I'm just being honest. Now, look. There's no denying Marilyn Monroe's beauty. I mean, I cannot deny it, whatever. I have never been obsessed with Marilyn Monroe. I mean, whether as an actress, as a movie star, in terms of her death, I have never been, I've never held any kind of obsession with it. And like I said, aside from Some Like It Hot, I don't return to any of her movies. There's still a few key ones I've not seen. But for the most part, I mean, like I said, for most of Marilyn's movies, I don't need to see again. I saw 7 Year Itch probably 100 times when I was growing up. That was one of the ones I saw more than a few times. But the only one I own on physical media is Some Like It Hot. And I mean, here again, this movie is available on Blu-ray. I mean, not all of Mitzi's movies are available on physical media, but of course, because this has Marilyn, Fox, put this out. But the truth is that when Fox put out this Blu-ray, they put no extras on it. And that is actually very, very surprising, considering that for, many of Mitzi's movies, like these, these 20th century marquee musicals. Here's Dan Dailey on the cover of My Blue Heaven. Both of these, not only did they restore the prints, but they also added extras. Yeah, these are two of my favorite Mitzi movies, and of course, I'm glad to have pretty damn good DVD copies of both of them. And considering what the ultimate fate is of the Fox studio library, who knows if these will ever get a Blu-ray release or any other kind of future release. But they did put out a Blu-ray of There's No Business Like Show Business, and you can get it at a budget price. Unfortunately, I just don't love the music or the musical numbers enough to go ahead and buy it. I just don't have, I have my Mitzi movies that I will watch over and over again for the rest of my life. This is not going to be one of them. This is just not going to be one of them, despite, of course, this film is overloaded with talent. But here again, I do think as a musical, it is overblown to the nth degree. I think they spent too much. I think it's too much of everything. I think they spent way too much. And also, like I said, if all of these musical numbers had more of a connection, if they served the story more, and they served the characters more, and there was actually more to it than just putting on a show, I think I would have been a little bit more enthusiastic about this and more appreciative. And look, the crew probably worked their asses off. I give them full respect. The CinemaScope process and cinematography by Leon Shamroy, one of the greats, absolutely stunning, absolutely gorgeous. I have no complaints whatsoever about that. It's just too much of everything. It's just too much of everything. Now, going back to IMDb trivia to go over a few other things here. Donald O'Connor had separated from his wife of 10 years. She and Dan Dailey, who played O'Connor's father, were dating during the shooting of the film. After filming wrapped, the O'Connors divorced, and shortly thereafter, Gwen Carter and Dan Dailey married. One day, Marilyn Monroe's husband, Joe DiMaggio, visited the set. He refused to be photographed with Monroe, but insisted on being photographed with Ethel Merman, whom he called, quote, my favorite star. Wow. I think Joe was on to something here. I think they should have kept the attention on Ethel. Here. See, here's Marilyn Monroe in her first of several numbers, which meh. Okay, now her reaction right here, that's pretty much my reaction. It's like, okay. Yeah, I can appreciate it for a few seconds, and then I'm just like, okay, can we get to the next scene here? Can we get this number over with and get to the next scene? And unfortunately, during this musical, that's how I felt. Top-billed Ethel Merman was concerned that audiences might focus on Marilyn Monroe's stunning figure rather than Merman's vocals in the film's finale. She specifically requested that costume designer Travilla, who I talked about extensively in my Down Among the Sheltering Palms commentary, a gown that would allow Ethel to compete with Marilyn. The result was a white satin dress with wings atop its bodice that gave the illusion that Merman was at least as busty as Monroe. See, was that really necessary? There was no reason for Merman to even go that far. And here again, it's Fox's fault. I don't blame Marilyn. It's Fox's fault. On the Decca soundtrack album, Marilyn Monroe's voice was replaced by singer Dolores Gray because Monroe was under contract to RCA Victor, which would not release the rights for use on the album. Monroe's 4 vocals, including the outtake You'd Be Surprised, were released by RCA on a 45 RPM extended play issue. Anything You Can Do, music and lyrics by Irving Berlin and sung by Ethel, Merman, Dan Dailey, Donald O'Connor, and Mitzi Gaynor, was originally slated for the number the Donahues perform in the Florida nightclub once Tim O'Connor gives Heat Wave to Vicky, played by Marilyn Monroe. The quartet was cut from the film, though the footage still exists, and the Donahues can be seen in the number's costumes as they watch Monroe singing Heat Wave from the Wings. I mean, do you understand the frustration? I mean, it's just, I know, I'm not making a huge deal out of it. I'm just saying that had it focused on the family, I think it would have done, maybe not done better box office wise, because the truth of the matter is this was actually kind of a loss. This was a flop. Yeah, this was a flop. Not really a huge flop, but it was a flop nonetheless for the studio. And I think they wanted this to do like $8, $9, $10 million or something like that. But yeah, this was a $5 million flop. Not quite a fiasco, just a flop. During the filming of the scene where Donald O'Connor and Marilyn Monroe were kissing, there were over 1,000 onlookers who had drifted over from other sets. The scene where Vicky Parker, played by Marilyn Monroe, argues with her producer over the gown that she will wear in the Broadway show is based on a real-life dispute between Monroe and director Walter Lang. Monroe didn't like the gowns that Miles White had designed for her to wear in this film and insisted that costume designer Travilla should design new costumes for her. Irving Berlin loved Ethel Merman, having first worked with her in her previous cavalcade of his songs, Alexander's Ragtime Band, in 1938. After that film, Berlin told her that he was so impressed with her talent that he promised to work with her again. He kept that promise and wrote 2 Broadway shows, especially for her. Annie Get Your Gun in 1946 and Call Me Madam in 1950, the latter of which also starred Merman in the film adaptation Call Me Madam. The song There's No Business Like Show Business is from Annie Get Your Gun. The pastiche of existent Irving Berlin songs was originally cobbled together to showcase Broadway legend Ethel Merman, who was never able to replicate her stage success on the screen. But as production progressed, Fox studio executives learned more and more heavily on their newest star, Marilyn Monroe, beefing up her parts, and even taking away songs away from Merman and giving them to Marilyn. This is all on IMDb trivia. I wish there were sources, but this is according to IMDb. During the making of the CD, it was discovered that half the Play a Simple Melody duet was deteriorated beyond repair, with the result that Ethel Merman is credited on the CD label with singing with a temporary vocal double for Dan Dailey. However, the non-stereo version was intact and was added to the CD as well. They are tracks 14 and 15. At the time he made this film, Donald O'Connor had recently concluded a short-term contract at MGM and had not yet signed with another studio. Francis, in 1950, in which he and his co-star, a talking mule named Chill Wills, had proved to be a big box office hit several years earlier, and with a franchise on the horizon, O'Connor returned to his first home studio, Universal, where he would eventually make 5 more Francis movies while simultaneously focusing on building a variety career on television. Oh, Lamar Trotty received a posthumous Oscar nomination for Best Original Story for There's No Business Like Show Business, but he died of a heart attack in 1952, 2 years before the movie was released. With Triple Threat, Dan Dailey had both lighthearted musicals and serious dramas. This was arguably the only film of his career that showcased all his many talents under one roof. The role of Terry Donahue was a song and dance man who weathered his share of heartache and loss as the patriarch of a splintered vaudeville family. Not even his Oscar-nominated turn in When My Baby Smiles at Me offered him so ripe an opportunity to demonstrate his acting chops. Ethel Merman had no objection to Marilyn Monroe was added to the cast, telling a friend, quote, "Hell, she's the one we need to sell the picture." However, Merman chafed at Monroe's lack of professionalism, including her constant tardiness and her over-reliance on her acting coach, Natasha Lytess, instead of director Walter Lang. Mitzi Gaynor, who played Merman's daughter in the film, found ways to break the tension. Quote, "Whenever Marilyn wouldn't come out of her dressing room, I gave Ethel a wink, hinting that something naughty was going on in there. Of course, that wasn't true, but if Ethel thought maybe some hanky-panky was going on, she could enjoy the situation." Yeah, it grossed $5.1 million at the box office, and the budget was $5.3. Ouch. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Despite its stellar cast, its being in the new Cinescope process, and it's featuring a score of classic Irving Berlin songs, the film's excessive budget caused a loss to 20th Century Fox of about $950,000. For some reason, the brunt, if the blame for its failure, was put on Johnny Ray. This guy right here, Johnny Ray. And you know what? Let's go back to talking about Johnny Ray a bit. I don't think he's bad in this movie. I honestly don't think he's bad in this movie. But then again, I don't think that he's certainly not on the level of Mitzi or Ethel or Dan. I mean, he's not quite there. But inspired by rhythm singers like Kay Starr, Laverne Baker, and Ivory Joe Hunter, Ray developed a unique rhythm-based singing style described as alternating between pre-rock rhythm and blues and a more conventional classic pop approach. He began singing professionally on a Portland, Oregon radio station at age 15, sharing billing with Jane Powell, then a local young singer. He later performed in comedy shows and theatrical productions in Seattle, Washington, before relocating to Detroit, Michigan. He regularly performed at the Flames Show Bar, an African-American nightclub where he developed a local following. While performing at the Flame, Ray attracted the attention of Bernie Lang, a song plugger, who saw him perform with local DJ Robin Seymour of WKMH. Lang went to New York to sell the singer to Danny Kessler of Oka Records label. Kessler came over from New York. He, Lang, and Seymour went to the Flame. According to Seymour, Kessler's reaction was, quote, "Well, I don't know. This kid looks well on the stand, but he will never go on records." Ray's first record for the race label OK, the self-penned R&B number Whiskey and Gin, was a minor hit in 1951. When executives at OK's parents, Columbia Records, realized that the Caucasian Ray had developed a fan base of Caucasian listeners, he was moved over to the Columbia label. In 1952, he dominated the American popular music charts with the double-sided hit single of Cry and The Little White Cloud That Cried. Selling over 2 million copies of the 78 RPM single, Ray's delivery struck a chord with teenagers, and he quickly became a teen idol. The live television broadcast of Toast to the Town on January 6, 1952, included the first of his several appearances on the widely seen American program that officially changed its title in 1955 to The Ed Sullivan Show. Ray's performing style included theatrics later associated with rock and roll, including tearing at his hair, falling to the floor, and crying on stage. Ray quickly earned the nicknames Mr. Emotion, the Nabob of Sob, the Prince of Wales, W-A-I-L-S, and several others. 20th Century Fox executives included him in the ensemble cast of There's No Business Like Show Business. The latter was intended for a release to cinemas in 1960. Another film as a cameo as a police officer is Rogues Gallery. He made only one other film called Rogues Gallery in '68. In the 1980s, when Ray was asked why he never made another widely seen film after Business, he replied, "I was never asked." In the 1950s, after both singles of Cry and The Little White Cloud That Cried ran their course, more hit songs followed. They include Please Mr. Sun, Such a Night, Walking My Baby Back Home, A Sinner Am I, and Yes Tonight, Josephine. He scored a #1 hit in the United Kingdom with Just Walking in the Rain, which he initially disliked, during the Christmas season in 1956. He hit it again in 1957 with You Don't Owe Me a Thing, which reached #10 on the Billboard charts in the United States. Though his American popularity was declining in '57, he remained popular in the United Kingdom, breaking the attendance record at the London Palladium, formerly set by fellow Columbia Records artist Frankie Lane. In later years, he retained a loyal fan base overseas, particularly in Australia. Ray was significantly influenced by gospel music and numerous African American singers, especially Billie Holiday, Little Miss Cornshucks, and Laverne Baker, as well as Judy Garland and Kay Starr. In early 1990, poor health forced Ray to check into Cedars-Sinai Medical Center near his home in LA. On February 24th, 1990, he died of hepatic, I'm not going to try to say that, liver failure, basically. For his contribution to the recording industry, Johnny Ray was honored with a star in 1960 on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In 1999, Bear Family Records issued 2 5-CD sets of his entire body of work, each containing an 84-page book on his career. Companies including Sony Music Entertainment, the parent company of Columbia Records and Collectibles, have kept his large catalog of recordings in continual release worldwide. Music journalist Robert A. Rodriguez noted Ray's contemporary obscurity in the 2006 book, The 1950s Most Wanted, the Top 10 Book of Rock and Roll Rebels, Cold War Crises, and All-American Oddities, writing, "Though barely mentioned today, to the 50s record buying public, Ray was something of a former day Leonard Cohen or a Morrissey, creating a body of work that was the very definition of Depression Fest, with titles like What's the Use or What a Sad, Sad Day or Here I Am Brokenhearted, coupled with a stage show that was emotionally draining as a revival meeting. Ray dominated the pre-rock and roll charts. Scholar Cheryl Herr notes the impact of Ray's deafness on his unique performing style and vocals, writing, "Ray was a singer whose hearing range appears literally to have defined the contour of his performance. The nature of his short-lived popularity and his enduring iconic status in pre-rock and proto-rock." And like I said, he is not to blame for this movie flopping one iota. Like I said, Fox is to blame. Archival footage of Ray arriving at London Heathrow Airport in 1954 was featured in the 1982 music video Dexy's Midnight Runners hit single Come On Eileen. The lyrics of the song also mention him, "Poor old Johnny Ray sounded sad upon the radio, moved a million hearts in mono." Ray is mentioned in the lyrics of Billy Idol's 1986 hit Don't Need a Gun and appears in the video. Multiple elements of Ray's self-composed hit I'll Never Fall in Love Again are sampled in Portishead's song Biscuit. He is mentioned in the lyrics of Van Morrison's 1997 song Sometimes We Cry from his album The Healing Game, a song that features the backing vocals of Brian Kennedy and Georgie Fame. Ray is one of the cultural touchstones mentioned in the first verse concerning events from the late 40s and early 50s of Billy Joel's 1989 hit single We Didn't Start the Fire between Red China and South Pacific. He mentioned in the lyrics of Jimmy Ray's 1997 song Are You Jimmy Ray? Ray was also referred to in 2 Eartha Kitt songs, Monotonous from New Faces of 1952, I Even Made Johnny Ray Smile for Me, and I Want to Be Evil, I Want to Sing Songs Like the Guy Who Cries. A fictionalized version of him appears as in James Ellroy's 2021 novel Widespread Panic, and Bob Dylan has spoken about his very early influences before he had ever listened to a rock and roll legend or Hank Williams. Dylan was quoted as saying, quote, "Before that, Johnny Ray, he was the first singer whose voice had and style. I guess I totally fell in love with. There was just something about the way he sang When Your Sweetheart Sends a Letter that just knocked me out. I loved his style, and I wanted to dress like him too. Well, all that being said, he is not to blame for why this movie flopped. No way, shape, or form. No way, shape, or form. I also liked it earlier when Mitzi Gaynor was out on her date and she ordered ginger ale. I am a ginger ale man myself, so I would have been, I would have been honored to have a ginger ale with Mitzi Gaynor. Oh man. Of course, if I met her in this movie, I would say, hey, well, we better do our own act and get away from Marilyn. But yeah, here's Johnny Ray. I mean, like I said, I thought he was fine in this. I mean, yeah, it shows that he has inexperience, but I mean, there's a lot of singers that have, and he doesn't appear often. He's in it, I think, just enough where he doesn't become a liability. Certainly, I mean, certainly not a liability in the way Marilyn is. But yeah, I was okay with him in this movie for some reason. And everybody else seemed to gang up on him. Well, Fox needed to blame somebody else. They needed a fall guy. And Johnny Ray was the fall guy for There's No Business Like Show Business, which of course is just not fair. It's completely unfair to him. This was his first movie. He had all the talent in the world going into it. It just didn't quite work out. All right, we're coming up on the 53-minute mark. We are 53 minutes into There's No Business Like Show Business. Now, we need to talk a bit more about Ethel Merman now, because she's really, I mean, in my eyes, she is the star of this movie. And here again, I think she deserved so much more in terms of, the screen, because the stage served her, she served the stage very well and vice versa, became a sensation. And the screen career just didn't quite happen. It just didn't quite happen. But she had also done films while she was also on the stage. While performing on the prestigious Keith circuit, Merman was signed to replace Ruth Etting in the Paramount film Follow the Leader, starring Edwin and Ginger Rogers. Following a successful 7-week run at the Brooklyn Paramount, she was signed to perform at the Palace for $500 a week. During the run, theater producer Vinton Friedley saw her perform and invited her to audition for the role of San Francisco cafe singer Kate Fothergill in the new George and Ira Gershwin musical Girl Crazy. Upon hearing her sing I Got Rhythm, the Gershwins immediately cast her, and Merman began balancing daytime rehearsals with her matinee and evening performance schedule at the Palace. Merman introduced the song Sam and Delilah and Boy What Love Has Done to Me, as well as I Got Rhythm in the show. Girl Crazy opened on October 14th, 1930 at the Alvin Theater, where it ran for 272 performances. The New York Times noted Merman sang, quote, with dash, authority, good voice, and just the right knowing style. And the New Yorker called her imitative of no one. Merman was indifferent to her reviews, prompting George Gershwin to ask her mother, quote, have you ever seen a person so unconcerned as Ethel? During the run of Girl Crazy, Paramount signed Merman to appear in a series of 10 short musical films, most of which allowed her to sing both a rousing number and a ballad. She also performed at the Central Park Casino, the Paramount Theater, and a return engagement at the Palace. As soon as Girl Crazy closed, her parents and she departed for a vacation in Lake George in upstate New York. But after the first day there, Merman was summoned to Atlantic City, New Jersey to help salvage the troubled latest edition of George White's Scandals. Because she was still under contract to Friedley, White was forced to pay the producer $10,000 for her services, in addition to her weekly $1,500 salary. Following the Atlantic City run, the show played in Newark, New Jersey, and then Brooklyn before opening on Broadway, where it ran for 202 performances. Merman returned to Hollywood to appear in We're Not Dressing, 1934, a screwball comedy based on the J.M. Barrie play The Admirable Crichton. Despite working with a cast including Bing Crosby, Carole Lombard, and Burns and Allen, under the direction of Academy Award-winning director Norman Taurog, Merman was unhappy with the experience, and she was dismayed to discover one of her musical numbers had been cut when she attended the New York opening with her family and friends. She also appeared on screen with Eddie Cantor in Kid Millions, but a return to Broadway established her as a major star and cemented her image as a tough girl. Anything Goes was the first of 5 Cole Porter musicals in which Merman starred. In addition to the title song, the score included I Get a Kick Out of You, You're the Top, and Blow, Gabriel, Blow. It opened on November 21st, 1934 at the Alvin Theater, and the New York Post called Merman, quote, vivacious and ingratiating in her comedy moments, and the embodiment of poise and technical adroitness when singing as she only knows how to do. Although Merman always had remained with the show until the end of its run, she left Anything Goes after 8 months to appear with Eddie Cantor in the film Strike Me Pink. She was replaced by Benet Venuta, with whom she enjoyed a long but frequently tempestuous friendship. Merman initially was overlooked for the film version of Anything Goes in 1936. Bing Crosby insisted his wife Dixie Lee be cast as Reno Sweetie opposite his role as Billy Crocker, but when she unexpectedly dropped out of the project, Merman was cast in the role. From the beginning, it was clear to Merman the film would not be the enjoyable experience she had hoped it would be. The focus was shifted to Crosby, leaving her in a supporting role, and many of Porter's ribald lyrics were altered to conform to the guidelines of the Motion Picture Production Code, and Blow, Gabriel, Blow was eliminated, replaced by a song Shang Hey Dee Ho, which Merman was forced to perform in a headdress made of peacock feathers while surrounded by dancers dressed as Chinese slave girls. And I'm going to be talking more about Anything Goes when I actually do the commentary for the 1956 version, and I'll be talking about the 36 version during that time. In 1943, Merman was a featured performer in the film Stage Door Canteen and opened up in another Porter musical, Something for the Boys, produced by Michael Todd. In 1944, she was set to star as the title character in the musical play Sadie Thompson, with a score by Vernon Duke and Howard Dietz, directed and produced by Reuben Mamoulian. The musical play was based on the short story Rain by W. Somerset Maugham. The serious nature of the production was a departure from Merman's string of successful musical comedies. During rehearsals, Merman had difficulties memorizing lyrics, and she blamed Dietz for his use of sophisticated and foreign words. Merman and Berlin reunited for Call Me Madam in 1950 after the success of Annie Oakley. She returned to Broadway at the behest of her third husband, Continental Airlines executive Robert Six, who was upset she had chosen to become a housewife in Colorado following their wedding in 1953. He expected her public appearances to generate publicity for the airline, and her decision to forego the limelight did not sit well with him. He urged her to accept the role in Happy Hunting, with a book by Howard Lindsay and Russell Crowe, who had written Call Me Madam, and a score by Harold Carr and Matt Doobie. Merman acquiesced to her husband's demands, although she clashed with her composers from the start, and soon was at odds with co-star Fernando Lamas and his wife Arlene Dahl, who frequently attended rehearsals. The show opened in New York with an advance sale of $1.5 million, and despite Merman's dissatisfaction with it, garnered respectable reviews. Although Brooks Atkinson thought the score was, quote, hardly more than adequate, he called Merman as brassy as ever, glowing like a neon light whenever she steps on the stage. Several months into the run, she insisted that the two of her least favorite numbers be replaced by songs written by her friend Roger Edens, who, because of his exclusive contract with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, credited them to Kay Thompson. She lost the Tony Award to Judy Holliday for Bells Are Ringing, and the show closed after 412 performances, with Merman happy to see what she considered, quote, a dreary obligation come to an end. And then she did Gypsy in 1959, 702 performance run. Following the Broadway closing of Gypsy on March 25th, 1961, Merman half-heartedly embarked on a national tour. In San Francisco, she severely injured her back, but continued to perform for packed houses. During the Los Angeles run, Leroy visited her backstage and claimed Russell was so ill that, quote, I think you're going to end up getting this part. Believing the film version of Gypsy was within her grasp, she provided him with many house seats he requested for her friends and industry colleagues, only to discover she had been duped. Merman's role in Gypsy earned her an estimated $130,000 per year. In 1963, Merman starred in the ensemble comedy It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, alongside Spencer Tracy, Caesar, Jonathan Winters, Phil Silvers, Buddy Hackett, and Mickey Rooney. Merman played Mrs. Marcus, the loudmouth mother-in-law of Milton Berle. The film was a major box office success, earning $60 million on a budget of $9.4 and becoming the third highest film grossing film of 1963. In 1979, Ethel Merman recorded the Disco album, with many of her signature songs set to a disco beat. She was a guest host on an episode of the first season of The Muppet Show. Her last screen role was a self-parody in the 1980 comedy film Airplane, in which she portrayed Lieutenant Hurwitz, a shell-shocked soldier who thinks he is Ethel Merman. Yeah, that was Ethel Merman. In the cameo appearance, Merman leaps out of bed singing Everything's Coming Up Roses as orderlies sedate her. She appeared in several episodes of The Love Boat, playing Gopher's mother, guest starred on the CBS London Palladium, performed with Mary Martin in a concert benefiting the theater and museum collection of the Museum of the City of New York, and frequently appeared as a soloist with Symphony Orchestra. She also volunteered at the St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital Center, now Mount Sinai West, working in the gift shop or visiting patients. Merman was known for her powerful mezzo-soprano voice, belting, precise enunciation, and pitch. Because stage singers performed without microphones when Merman began singing professionally, she had a great advantage, despite never taking vocal lessons. Broadway lore holds that George Gershwin advised her never to take such lessons after she opened in Girl Crazy. Carol Flynn's 2007 biography includes many quotes from reviews of Ethel Merman's work, most of which were compliments to her. Brooks Atkinson summed up her talent. Quote, she makes a song seem like a spontaneous expression of her personality, which may be regarded as the ultimate skill in the art of singing songs. Unquote. Merman was notorious for her brash demeanor and for telling vulgar stories at public parties. For instance, she once shouted a dirty joke across the room at Jose Fier during a formal reception. While rehearsing a guest appearance on the Loretta Young show, Merman exclaimed, quote, where the hell does this go? Young, who was an devout Catholic, advanced towards Merman waving an empty coffee can, saying, Miss Merman, you said the H word. That'll be 25 cents. To which Ethel Merman replied, tell me, Loretta, how much will it cost me to tell you to go fuck yourself? Here's to Ethel Merman. Yeah. All right. So that's Ethel Merman for you. Now, Donald O'Connor was, of course, most famous for doing Singing in the Rain. You know, that very famous comedy number. And, of course, he would later join Mitzi Gaynor in the film version of Anything Goes in 1956, which was a remake of the 1936 film. During World War II, on his 18th birthday in August of 1943, Donald O'Connor was drafted into the United States Army. Before he reported for induction on February 6, 1944, Universal already had 4 O'Connor films completed. They rushed to production to complete 4 more by that date, all with Ryan. This is The Life, The Mary Monaghan's, Valerie to Broadway, and Patrick the Great. Upon O'Connor's return from military service, Universal did not know what to do with their young star. He was almost broke. A merger in 1946 had reorganized the studio as Universal International. Finally, the studio paired O'Connor opposite their biggest female star, Deanna Durbin, in Something in the Wind, 1947. He starred in Are You With It, 1948, and Fussin' and a Fightin', 1949, and Yes, Sir, That's My Baby in 1949 with Gloria DeHaven, who we talked about during the commentary for Down Among the Sheltering Palms. Quote, I wasn't really a good dancer, until I got older, Donald O'Connor said. I could do those wings and stuff, and I looked very good, but my heavens, it was very, very hard for me to pick up steps. It was just, so laborious for me. I didn't have a shortcut like other dancers do, unquote. In 1949, O'Connor played the lead role in Frances, the story of a soldier befriended by a talking mule. Directed by Arthur Lubin, the film was a huge success. As a consequence, his musical career was constantly interrupted by production of one Frances film per year until 1955. O'Connor later said the films were, quote, fun to make. Actually, they were quite challenging. I had to play straight in order to convince the audience that the mule could talk. O'Connor followed the first Frances with comedies Curtain Call at Cactus Creek, The Milkman, and Double Crossbones. He did Frances Goes to the Races in 1951, another big hit. In February, he signed a new contract with Universal for one film a year for 4 years, enabling him to work outside the studio. In January of 52, O'Connor signed a 3-picture deal with Paramount. He also received an offer to play Cosmo, the piano player, in Singing in the Rain at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. That film featured his widely known rendition of Make 'Em Laugh, which he choreographed with help from the assistant dance directors and his brother. O'Connor's unassuming yet extreme athleticism is on full display, with the number featuring dozens of jumps, pratfalls, and 2 backflips launched by running halfway up a wall. The scene was building to such a crescendo, I thought I'd actually have to kill myself, said O'Connor. He maintained he was forced to go to the hospital during the film's production due to injuries and exhaustion. His electric performance stood out, even alongside the matchless Gene Kelly, and earned the 1953 Golden Globe Award for Best Performance by an Actor in a Comedy or Musical. He went back to Universal for Frances Goes to West Point, returned to MGM for I Love Melvin, a musical with Debbie Reynolds, and he began appearing regularly on television. One review in 1952 called him the new star of the year. Movie bred, he has the versatility of a Jimmy Durante and the effervescence of youth. He can dance, he can sing, he can act, and he can spout humor, but not yet with the finesse of a veteran. He supported Ethel Merman in Call Me Madame at 20th Century Fox, later saying the film contained his best dancing. After Frances Covers the Big Town in 1953, Universal put O'Connor in a musical in color Walking My Baby Back with Janet Leigh. He did Frances Joins the Wax, and then played Tim Donahue in the 20th Century All-Star musical There's No Business Like Show Business, which featured Irving Berlin's music and starred Ethel Merman, Marilyn Monroe, and Dan Dailey, and Mitzi Gaynor, and Johnny Ray. He was meant to play Bing Crosby's partner in White Christmas. O'Connor was unavailable because he contracted an illness transmitted by the mule and was replaced in the film by Danny Kaye. O'Connor's industry and public recognition reached a peak in 1954 when he was asked to MC that year's Academy Awards ceremony. He starred in the Donald O'Connor Show from 1954 to 55 for one season. He was reluctant to keep making Frances films, but agreed to Frances in the Navy in 1955. Arthur Lubin, who directed the series, later called that O'Connor, quote, got very difficult to work with after a while. He'd sit in his dressing room and stare into space, and I think he had problems at home. Frances in the Navy was Donald O'Connor's last film for Universal after 13 years with the company. At a farewell luncheon, the studio executives presented him with a gift, a camera and 14 rolls of film. O'Connor was stunned at the insignificance of the gift after all the millions of dollars he had made for the studio, and in later life recalled, what can I say about these people? O'Connor and Bing Crosby united on Anything Goes. The studio also released Buster Keaton's story, in which O'Connor had the title role as Buster Keaton. The Brussels Symphony Orchestra recorded some of his work. In 1956, he conducted the LA Philharmonic in a performance of his first symphony, Reflections d'un Comique. He hosted a color television special in 1957 for NBC, one of the earliest color programs to be preserved on a color kinescope. An excerpt of the telecast was included in NBC's 50th anniversary special in 1976. In the late 50s, he began guest starring on shows like Playhouse 90, The DuPont Show of the Month, and The Red Skelton Hour, but his focus moved increasingly to touring live shows. He appeared as a gaslight era entertainer in the 1981 film Ragtime, notable for similar encore performances by James Cagney and Pat O'Brien. It was his first feature role in 16 years. O'Connor appeared in the short-lived Bring Back Birdie on Broadway in 1981. Following year, he was in I Ought to Be in Pictures in L.A. He was Captain Andy in a short-lived Broadway revival of Showboat and continued to tour in various shows and acts. I've been on the road forever, he said in 1985, adding, quote, I'd consider another movie or TV series, but I won't play an old man. Art Carney is about my age, and he's making a career out of being old. I'm still singing and dancing. I'm not ready to be old. O'Connor guest starred in The Littlest Hobo, Fantasy Island, Simon & Simon, Alice in Wonderland, Love Boat, and Highway to Heaven, and was in the films Pandemonium, A Mouse, a Mystery, and Me, and A Time to Remember. He bought a theater, the Donald O'Connor Theater, and would perform it with his children. In a 1989 interview, he said, there's an element out there that wants to be entertained, and they can't find this kind of thing I do. And yeah, I think I wear well. I sing, I dance, I do comedy. I'm not threatening. When you grow up in a circus family, the more things you learn, the more you get paid. So I can do straight comedy without the song and dance. I can do all kinds of combinations. Whatever's in at that time, I can fit into. And his very last movie was in 1997, Out to Sea, which also had Gloria DeHaven, which I mentioned Sunday as well during the Down Among the Sheltering Palms commentary. He was also in that weird Robin Williams movie called Toys in 1992. And he was also in, of course, That's Entertainment and The Big Fix with Richard Dreyfuss. So we are now 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 45 seconds. 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 45 seconds into There's No Business Like Show Business. Yeah, this movie is 117 minutes long, which, in my opinion, is a real stretch. I think, I would have preferred more of a, a Bloodhounds of Broadway or a My Blue Heaven and just make it like a 90-minute movie. But, they wanted to blow it all up with all these Irving Berlin songs and just, like I said, it was just too much. I think it was just too much all the way around. Now, Walter Lang, I already mentioned before that he directed Mother Wore Tights in 1947 with Betty Grable and Dan Dailey. He also directed Cheaper by the Dozen in 1950. And then he had some of his biggest films in the 50s because, he started out in 1925. He directed The Red Kimono. And then by the 30s, he started to get a few more bigger roles. He directed The Three Stooges and Meet the Baron in 1933. And then his first real hit was The Little Princess with Shirley Temple in 1939. He also directed The Bluebird with Shirley Temple in 1940. He also did Coney Island with Betty Grable, as well as the 1945 version of State Fair with Gene Crane and Dana Andrews, and also directed Sitting Pretty about the character of Mr. Belvedere. But his biggest success was actually after There's No Business Like Show Business, because 20th Century Fox chose Walter Lang to direct his greatest success, The King and I, based on Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical, starring Deborah Kerr, Yul Brynner, Rita Moreno, and Martin Benson, and it grossed $21.3 million on a $4.5 million budget. And that was the biggest success of director Walter Lang's career. Now, unfortunately, he didn't have another hit like that again. He did Death Set, which broke even with Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. Then he did Can Can with Shirley MacLaine and Frank Sinatra, which did not break even. It actually lost money. And then finally, last but not least, he also directed Snow White and the Three Stooges, which was another bomb, and he retired from the industry at that point. See, now this number right here is a perfect example of where instead of just being part of the family, just being another one, another singer and dancer of the family that where we can focus on her in a group. No, we have to start following Marilyn for the entire rest of the song and leave O'Connor and Gaynor on the couch. And here again, I still maintain that Marilyn Monroe is just a massive distraction in this movie. For this particular movie and what it was trying to accomplish with Ethel Merman and everything, there was too much attention placed on Marilyn during production, and it just altered everything. Mitzi didn't get as enough screen time, which is a massive disappointment. Instead we just focus everything on Donald O'Connor and Marilyn Monroe for virtually the entire second half of the movie, and it just gets it just gets so frustrating, and it doesn't go anywhere. It just literally does not go anywhere. We'll just have another song and dance at the end, and that'll be the end of the movie. So yeah. See, I mean, they're making Mitzi and Donald be virtual spectators to Marilyn whenever she takes the stage. And like there were those other shots in there earlier of Ethel Merman and Dan Dailey just watching Marilyn. Like I said, Fox should have just made her the protagonist. If they really wanted to focus so much on her, they should have just, changed the course of the whole thing and just made her the protagonist. Because, like I said, Ethel Merman, Dan Dailey, and Mitzi Gaynor, they all got the short ends of the stick. Don O'Connor at least got a little bit more to do, but here again, I mean, his scenes with Marilyn, and they have no chemistry. Look, I'm sure they got along okay. I'm sure they got along fine, but yeah, there was just no real romantic chemistry or spark between them at all, which of course doesn't help things. It's amazing when my parents passed away. They left a massive LP collection, a massive record collection. And of course, they had virtually every Broadway musical in the book, from Kiss Me Kate to Brigadoon, you name it. They had virtually all of them, including There's No Business Like Show Business. Although we never had the movie growing up, and we never watched it when I was growing up. But I'm pretty sure we had the LP for the soundtrack in there. Now, of course, when I got all those records, of course, my first question is, who the hell is Lawrence Welk? I never heard of Lawrence Welk before. We had like 15 records of his. It's like, yeah, I was not in the Lawrence Welk era at all. And now to me, he's just part of that joke from American Beauty, when they're at the dinner table and, the husband says, I'm getting tired of this Lawrence Welk shit. We really need to alternate our dinner music. We are now coming up on 1 hour and 21 minutes. 1 hour and 21 minutes into There's No Business Like Show Business. We have approximately 36 minutes left to go. Yeah. All right. Let's see here. Okay. This is what I was wondering earlier. The screenwriters are Phoebe and Henry Ephron, who are actually the parents of Nora and Delia and Hallie and Amy Ephron. Nora Ephron is, of course, sadly no longer with us, but she wrote When Harry Met Sally and, Sleepless in Seattle and many other hit movies. But Phoebe Ephron, her mother, was born in New York City. She was active as a writer from the early 40s through the early 60s. And she was nominated for an Oscar for Best Writing Screenplay based on material from another medium, along with partners Richard L. Breen and husband Henry Ephron for their work on Captain Newman, M.D. in 1963. And she passed away in 1971 at the age of 57. She also worked on Death Set, Carousel, the 1956 version of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Carousel. Now, Saul C. Siegel is the producer of this movie, and he is most definitely an interesting person, very much so. He did films like How the West Was Won and Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse and Where the Boys Are. One of the best films he produced was actually A Letter to Three Wives, but he was also the guy behind Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and High Society and my favorite Mitzi Gaynor movie, Lay Girl, and other movies like The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and Butterfield 8, Samara and the Village of the Damned, Atlantis, The Lost Continent. Now, the editing for There's No Business Like Show Business was by an editor named Robert Simpson. Born in 1910, passed away in 1977 at the age of 66. By the end of the decade in the 1930s, he had joined 20th Century Fox, where he remained for more than 35 years. I mean, he started out at Paramount, and then he went to 20th Century Fox. During a 55-year career, Simpson edited 100 films, including Drums Along the Mohawk, The Grapes of Wrath, The Pride of St. Louis, Call Me Madame, The King and I, South Pacific, Fate is the Hunter, and Tony Rome. He collaborated with director George Seaton on several projects, including Miracle on 34th Street, The Shocking Miss Pilgrim, Apartment for Peggy, and Chicken Every Sunday. He also worked with John Ford, Sidney Landfield, and Walter Lang, the director of There's No Business Like Show Business. And he was nominated for the Academy Award for Film Editing for The Grapes of Wrath. Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, like I said, the majority of the second act is just O'Connor and Marilyn. And, they're not fun as a couple. They're not entertaining as a couple. They're not really funny as a couple. I just can't root for them as a couple. Okay, that's just the truth. And here she's worried about her dress, and she can't go out to dinner with him, and of course he's going to be sobbing for pretty much the rest of the movie because he can't have Marilyn. And like I said, I don't think I'm being too harsh on this movie. I really don't think so. I mean, in a normal like 5-point scale, I would give this like a 2.5 out of 5. But you got to understand, I'm considering that in terms of the genre. To me, this is far from being one of the best musicals of the 1950s, despite how gorgeous it is. Yes, the CinemaScope is impressive. Yes, there are great dresses and there are great musical numbers, but it doesn't add up to greatness because this movie has a serious, serious lack of character development and complication. Serious lack. To publicize there's no business like show business, Marilyn Monroe wore a black cotton polka dot swimsuit. It went on auction at Christie's in London in 1991 and sold for $22,400 to collector David Gainsborough Roberts. Ed Sullivan described Monroe's performance of the song Heat Wave as one of the most flagrant violations of good taste he had ever witnessed. Time magazine compared her unfavorably to co-star Ethel Merman. Bosley Crowther in the New York Times called the film, quote, a major success in a generally favorable review, praising in particular Donald O'Connor's performance, but said that Mitzi Gaynor had surpassed Monroe's wriggling and squirming, which were, quote, embarrassing to behold. I'm right with you, man. I'm right with you, Bosley Crowther. I'm right with you on that. Don O'Connor drew unfavorable reviews for his, quote, overacting and uncanny flirting with Monroe on screen. Dan Dailey and Johnny Ray favored better among critics, although reviewers stated their performances were, quote, below average. Despite boasting a lavish production, indeed, Irving Berlin's There's No Business Like Showbiz eventually became both a critical and box office failure. Excessive at the time for a movie filmed entirely on a studio lot in Los Angeles, the expenses were mainly due to delays in production, the lavish musical numbers, and a running time that it was at least 15 minutes longer than most other Hollywood musicals. Yes, the film made just $5.1 million at the North American box office. Musicals at the time did less well overseas, and it was estimated it would only earn $2 million outside the U.S. and Canada. 20th Century Fox officials were disappointed. According to records, Fox was expecting a profit of $2 million, but ran a loss of $950,000. It is also significant that Johnny Ray never worked for 20th Century Fox or appeared in another motion picture or anything ever again. The film's TV premiere occurred October 28, 1961, on NBC's groundbreaking movie anthology series Saturday Night at the Movies, in a pan and scan version to match the square, small screen design of televisions manufactured at the time. Later syndicated broadcasts on local television stations were unkind to the legacy of There's No Business Like Show Business because it warranted a time slot of at least 2.5 hours, including commercials. And also because of the letterboxing of the era. Every CinemaScope movie lost much of its appeal when shown on television in the 60s and 70s, even if it was in black and white. But There's No Business Like Show Business was hit especially hard because of cinematographer Leon Shamroy's placement of at least two members of the ensemble cast on the wide screen in every frame, as they hit a lot of marks on the soundstage. The several dance sequences with at least 3 cast members were comprised by the pan and scan process. The movie's release to the home video market in the early 1990s solved the problem of commercial interruptions and improved its profits and reputation considerably. The issue of the aspect ratio of CinemaScope remained. However, a DVD release in 2001 included letterboxing and 4-channel surround sound, thereby eliminating the bad aspect ratio and introducing the movie to younger generations. It has received favorable reviews from critics and fans alike. Opening tonight, Vicky Parker in Manhattan Parade with Katie and Tim Donahue. Now, There's No Business Like Show Business was nominated for 3 Academy Awards: for Best Original Score for Alfred Newman and Lionel Newman, Best Story for Lamar Trotter, posthumously, and Best Costume Design in a Color Film by Charles Lemaire Trevilla and Miles White. and it did not win any of those awards. But it was also nominated for a Writers Guild of America award for the Efrons for Best Written Musical. That I don't agree with. I mean, like I said, some of the music is fine. Some of the music, some of the numbers are fine. Cherry pick your favorites however you want. But here again, I don't think there's much here in the way of structure or complication or any of those other things that make successful screenwriting. It's just not satisfying enough to me. It's just not. And that's just me personally, because I'm sure this movie has its fans. And it's kind of a shame that this is the one film, next to South Pacific that most Mitzi Gaynor fans have heard of, or most classic film fans have heard of in general, just because Fox spent so much money on it and it became this failure, even with Marilyn Monroe, even with their pushing of Marilyn Monroe. It still failed. To correct myself earlier, the budget was actually 4.3 and it made 5.1. But of course, it still lost money because of promotion and all that other stuff. So, yeah, still a loss of $950,000. Yeah. I mean, I like Ethel Merman for the most part in this movie. I mean, here again, it's just a shame how she was pushed into a corner. As with Mitzi Gaynor, of course. Yes. Now, this is probably my favorite musical number in the entire movie. This is a U.S. Navy number with Ethel Merman and Mitzi Gaynor. And no Marilyn anywhere. And this is an absolute delight. Of course, I served in the Navy for 8 years. And, growing up, I had no idea that, of course, Mitzi Gaynor played Navy nurse Nellie in South Pacific. And then I didn't end up seeing that movie until decades later. But, by now I've fallen in love with her, and I've been enjoying doing all these commentaries. Because she doesn't have an autobiography, and I think it's, I want at least some attention being put on more of her movies. But, it's interesting because this film came out in 1954, the same year as the other film that she did called Three Young Texans. I mean, this is the better film, but to be honest, I don't think that I don't think that I don't know. Three Young Texans is, isn't bad for a Western, but the thing is, I mean, do you want this overblown musical, or do you want a 74-minute Western where, Mitzi isn't there half the time? Well, I think it's obvious that we'd rather have this just for the musical numbers, where she's definitely in her element. And she's having a ball here. I mean, she said on most of her movies, if not all of them, that she just had a joy, total joy, coming to work and doing what she had to do, hitting all her marks, kicking ass, killing it every time, I mean, wait till we get to the I Don't Care Girl, because that's when she really dances off her caboose in a number of spectacular costumes. Oh yeah, you're not a sailor until you get a tattoo, Look, I will confess that when I was in the Navy, when I was 19 years old and we were in Malaysia, of course I was tempted to get a tattoo. Now, to be perfectly honest, I'm going to tell this story just because I don't have anything else left to talk about with this movie, and I might as well. It's related, so I might as well go for it. But no, I was in Malaysia, and I had the option of getting a tattoo. Now, first and foremost, I had no idea what the hell I was going to get, first off. And it's not the fact, I have nothing against needles. I mean, I have no problem with needles whatsoever. It's just the fact that I thought to myself, you know what? I don't want to have to wake up in 30 years and this thing is like sagging and like pruned and everything. I just didn't know if I wanted to wake up in the next 20 or 30 years with the tattoo still. So I never got one. So I guess I wasn't a real sailor, but look, no, I mean, it just wasn't my thing. I mean, I like tattoos on other people, particularly women. I do like tattoos on people, but it's never been my cup of tea. And to be fair, there were a lot of Navy guys that had tattoos. I mean, maybe on the ships that I was on, maybe a good 25, 30% had tattoos of some kind. Yeah, it's a really good number. It's just, it's just a shame that it's in a pretty meh movie overall. Here's Dan Dailey, and he's pretty much the only one left in the main cast that I haven't really talked about. But then again, he's also going to be in My Blue Heaven when I do the commentary for that, and I'm going to talk a bit more about him there. Over here real quick. We are approximately 1 hour and 37 minutes and 30 seconds, 1:37:30 in There's No Business Like Show Business, and we have approximately 20 minutes left. 20 minutes left of There's No Business Like Show Business. I'm so happy I'm going to be getting this one done. Yeah, this just didn't quite get there for me. It just didn't quite get there. But if you want to buy the Blu-ray, please do so before it disappears, because all these Fox DVDs and Blu-rays are going to be gone forever one day, and who knows if Disney is ever going to release these films from the vaults ever again. In the Heatwave number, Marilyn Monroe accidentally pokes her finger in the eye of a dancer standing between the branches of a prop tree. It's pretty obvious, and more so on the DVD in slow motion. The dancer jerks his head and looks down, but otherwise stays in character and continues with the number. Then Marilyn performs a twirl, sticks her head between the branches of the tree, and gives him a kiss. The kiss may have been a part of the choreography because she kisses another dancer before this, but it's possible it was an impromptu apology on Marilyn's part to make up for the eye poke. Interesting. Yeah, most of the reviews at IMDb are pretty good. I mean, a lot of them are 7 out of 10s, 6 out of 10s. Another Irving Berlin songbook. Donald O'Connor's favorite among his own films. Oh, really? That Extra Bow, 7 out of 10. Pushing the Limits, 7 out of 10. The Show Must Go On and On and On, 6 out of 10. Yeah, exactly. Total votes. The first time you watch this movie, you will think it's long, boring, and stupid. The second time you watch this movie, you'll love it. No, I can't begin to tell you why, but it's the truth. Marilyn is definitely eh. This movie was filmed during her worst years of personal abuses, and it shows all of her face in her work, lending a shadowy sadness to her character for modern audiences. Don O'Connor's character also takes on a new depth for modern viewers familiar with his own life history, oftentimes with a sharp poignance that helps him grab control of so many scenes and turn his character's story into the strongest subplot of the film. Merman is brilliant as the real head of the family, giving us a wonderfully unique character. Her role as the strong, smart, powerful, and loving mother is truly a standout for the 50s in general and movies in particular. Here again, I wish there was more of her. 7 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 7 out of 10. Yeah, a lot of these are 7 out of 10s. There are a few 10 out of 10s here. 1 out of 10, super irritating. Possibly the worst classic period movie musical ever made. See, I can't go that far. No way. I can't go like, okay. The movie weighs a ton and it sinks like an anchor. 4 out of 10, calling Gene Kelly and Alice Faye. 5 out of 10, after you get what you want, you don't want it. Oh, this is actually from my friend John. This is what he wrote. I like what he wrote here. And I think I pretty much agree with him, too. 5 out of 10. Yeah. Marilyn Monroe is the standout in this gaudy, brassy Fox musical about vaudeville family going from plane dives to headlining at the Hippodrome. What? They didn't take on Hollywood, too? Ethel Merman is the unlovable head of the household, and she's so tight with the apron strings that it's amazing anyone else can breathe. Donna O'Connor has a big dance routine with female statues who come to life, and Monroe sings lazy while crawling up and down a red divan. There's a small audience gathered to watch, but we never see their expressions, just the backs of their heads. This is the kind of old-fashioned shoot the star and move on style of filmmaking, which was out of date by 1950, 4 years prior. It was Ethel Merman's last movie musical. She or her managers must have realized it was time to move on. Too bad 20th Century Fox didn't get the same message. I absolutely agree with you, John. Absolutely agree with you. Yeah, 1 out of 10. One big flimsy plot excuse to hoof, holler, and boo hoo hoo. I find Ethel Merman as likable as the next person, and her semi-grating voice much more endearing than annoying. And the woman could even act. But this bit of Irving Berlin fluff was so pointless and silly that it might have been conceived by a 5-year-old. Wow. Empty spectacle. Yep. 4 out of 10. Lots of singing and dancing. Lots. See, that's the thing. Like the first 15 minutes is like almost all song and dances. We're supposed to be getting to know the characters during that time and find out what the overall end game is. What's the plan? What's the goal? You know, we don't get that with this movie. Watered down and unimpressive. Yep. Big musical with a highly contrived plot. Yes. Dazzling but forgettable musical. Yep. Mm-hmm. Let's see. And as far as external reviews are concerned, yeah, I think over at Blu-ray.com they gave it only 2 stars and a half as well. She was the innocent girl next door and a va-va-voom sex symbol, a dumb blonde anxious to be taken seriously, the archetypal exploited starlet, a shrewd showbiz negotiator, and on top of the world performer with a personal life in shambles. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is part, yeah, it was released on Blu-ray as part of the Forever Marilyn collection, a 7-disc set that features a selection of films made between 52 and 62. That include We're Not Married, though. But why couldn't they have given like Mitzi Gaynor a box set? And all her movies could have given some proper restorations and everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, Fox did a great job with My Blue Heaven and Bloodhounds of Broadway. But yeah, I mean, they didn't even bother giving this any extra features. I mean, they could have at least brought a commentary on. Because here's the truth. Had Fox commissioned extras for that There's No Business, like show business Blu-ray, I would have bought it. I mean, I would have bought it just to prepare for this commentary. But no, they couldn't even do that. And here again, as magnificent as the film looks and sounds, it's not enough for me. If I don't love the movie, I'm not going to buy it unless there are substantial extras. Mm-hmm. Yep. Not unless there's substantial extras. All right, so we are now at the 1 hour and 46 minutes, coming up on 1 hour and 46 minutes, and we have approximately 11 minutes left to go. And we will knock out There's No Business Like Show Business. Here again, gorgeous movie, some gorgeous stars in it, some very talented people in it. Ethel Merman, I think she deserved much more in terms of the screen. It didn't treat her just as kindly as the stage did. I think Mitzi deserved more from Fox at this point. And like I said, Marilyn just got too much attention, too much of responsibility, too much of the responsibility to sell this movie. And, I don't blame her. Like I said, I don't blame her for this movie at all. It's really Fox. It's all Fox. I mean, it's it's also, I mean, like we see all three women on the screen right now. I mean, you wish that something else could have been done that could have, worked it out a bit more, because it's super contrived how she becomes part of this family's lives, and it just doesn't pay off. It just doesn't pay off at all. I mean, Ethel Merman, when I was growing up, I mean, the first thing I thought of her as was Lola Lasagna in several third season episodes of Batman. There's a lot of Batman actors I've been discovering in these old, 20th Century Fox films, of course, that later ended up on that television show in the 60s. But yeah, Ethel Merman was a true star at that time, and it's just a shame she never had a successful movie career. And here's Johnny Ray again, who here again, he got a lot of blame when he certainly does not deserve any of the blame. Fox spent too much. I think they went overboard, and they made this musical overblown as hell. And it just didn't pay off. It obviously didn't pay off. And here again, I mean, even though there are definitely music numbers, there are choice numbers in the film. Like I said, my personal favorite being the Navy sailor number. The you're not a sailor until you get a tattoo, but it's too much of a hodgepodge. It's too much of a hodgepodge, too much of a mixed bag. Marilyn, I think, is used very inappropriately and very distractingly, and it just hurts the overall result. I wish it was better. And like I said, if only the Blu-ray had extras, I would buy it in a heartbeat. But it doesn't. So, and I don't love the movie enough to pop in a Blu-ray once a year or something like that. When I do Mitzi Gaynor's very last movie, For Love or Money, we'll talk about her films on physical media, and I will also talk about this special DVD, which I got in the mail just yesterday, which showcases all her stage shows after her film career ended in '63. But yeah, we'll go over all that. I plan on doing For Love or Money on Sunday, this Sunday, along with Lay Girl. So we'll see how that goes. But this was one I really just wanted to get over with. South Pacific, I mean, I can watch South Pacific again and again. This I can't. I just can't. I just have too many criticisms. I think there's just way too many flaws, particularly with the writing. And it doesn't even come close to being a classic in my book, even a classic musical. I think Mother Wore Tights is way better than this. from the same director, and it also got Dan Dailey in it. So, what is the climactic number? But of course, it's the title song. There's no business like show business. Yeah, yeah, da. And of course, at this point, I just like, okay, just end the movie already. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Look, Ethel Merman looks great. She delivers this number, extremely well. She had nothing left to prove at this point. It's terrific. Here again, it's just these minor little pleasures scattered throughout this movie, and it doesn't add up to enough. It just doesn't add up to enough. Oh, this looks actually to close out. Let me DVD Savant, Glenn Erickson. His reviews are always great. Let's see what he says real quick. Unlike modern stars, Marilyn at Fox sometimes had no choice at all over what roles she played, and this film is not one of her brightest moments. Thank you. Shoehorned, that's exactly the word I used earlier, and I assure you I did not read this review beforehand. Shoehorned into a semi-minor role in what is really Ethel Merman's starring vehicle, Marilyn acquits herself well. Yet the production is rather garish and empty, an awful lot of widescreen full of billowing sequin drapes. Yeah, and does no favors to talents like Donald O'Connor, who deserve better. The story is so light, it's almost not there, and although Marilyn Monroe is paired with Donald, it's totally by convention. Romantically involved, they hardly appear to know each other. 100%. She seems to have been shoehorned in to bolster the marquee. Duh. I know this is supposed to be the gaudy world of vaudeville, and I'm no judge of costumes, but the final kiss of death is that a lot of the stuff Marilyn is made to wear here is just plain ugly. Wow. Even I didn't go that far. The Irving Berlin musical numbers are, of course, the draw, and Ethel Merman is marvelous in one of her last big shows, belting out the title tune from her stage success, Annie Get Your Gun, brassier than Judy Garland or Betty Hutton ever could. But it's not a great movie, and it's certainly not good Marilyn. 100%. 100%. I had not read that review before tonight, and it completely sums up my feelings towards There's No Business Like Show Business. Completely. And of course, the family's together again. Yes. Yeah. It says a lot when I'd rather listen to the Von Trapp family singers than the 5 Donahues. Or is it 6 Donahues? I mean, should Marilyn be added to the Donahue family at this point? I mean, you would have expected one of those giant, signs like it had at the beginning said, oh yeah, 3 Donahues, now 5 Donahues. Okay, now 6 Donahues. Yeah. But here again, at the very, very least, There's No Business Like Show Business does contain some great musical numbers. The overall movie isn't great, but some of the music numbers are. Yeah, there, of course, is the family doing a final dance for the crowd. And who's going to join on in the middle of the number? But, yeah, you guessed it. Here again, shoehorned. I can't think of a better word to describe Marilyn's presence in this movie, which is shoehorned. Well, look, Mitzi in the red dress is, enough for me to keep watching. So keep forgetting about Marilyn's even in this movie. And the movie just has to drag to the last second. At this point, the movie is just dragging for me. It really is. And see, there you go. Now I do like the dress that she's wearing here. I don't see any problem with this. I mean, red, white, and blue. Okay, that works. Why not? Why not? But we had to have the close up of O'Connor and Marilyn as they're coming down the stairs. Where's Dailey's and Merman's close up? Where's Mitzi's and Johnny Ray's close up? So I guess it's the 6 Donahues. I don't know. I think by this time I probably would have been sleeping if I saw it in the theater. No, probably not. I mean, they're just stroking these cinemascope lenses for all they're worth. They really, really are. The grand finale, ladies and gentlemen, the end. A cinemascope production produced and released by 20th Century Fox Film Corporation. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Tomorrow I will be doing a couple more Mitzi Gaynor movies, including Anything Goes and The Birds and the Bees, which were both remakes and both came out in 1956, courtesy of Paramount Pictures. So thank you very much for joining me, and you all have a great evening. Thank you.